Can you imagine that? I actually take a turn in my career, first a second year career from a consulting company. Then because TVG joined a conglomerate here in Jakarta, and then he presented about strategic management. So I fell in love. So okay, I'll join the company because of that. So I forget the consulting for the time being. So that's the story in 1978, and then actually he has been my superior and for mentor for about 8 years until he, as TVG as an expatriate back to India, and then joining the Cadbury factories in India. They're running 3 factories or something like that. Before then, TVG will tell further about what he's doing after that. But I know that I was introduced to a few giant conglomerate in India, including Ola. Is it Ola, TVG?
Yep.
And then he also mentor for entrepreneurs too. So please, TVG.
Yeah, that's about, when you are my age, you don't talk about what has happened, especially when you are with such young people who are doing wonderful things, right? I mean, there isn't much to say. Yes, I've been with last 20 years with entrepreneurs, startups, different fields, technology, chips, education, all kinds of things. I mean, the whole gamut. I enjoy this stuff. I enjoy working with the people, and then the uncertainties that are involved and the strategy, the to and fro of fencing strategy. I like that, right? And I personally am, I like to disrupt things that exist. So anybody who's involved in that is somebody that I like to work with. That's how it happened. In the last 20 years I've been doing. Yeah.
Okay, TVG, thank you very much. Let me give some context of what is GIMI Think Tank. In the meantime, Laura is nudging people to participate and attend this meeting. So basically, GIMI Think Tank is a forum that we organize every week as an activity, part of GIMI activities. The idea is to bring here innovators all around the world who are experts in their field, who are professors, researchers, basically practitioners, GIMI ambassadors, GIMI partners, basically that are representing us in different countries. And always this is a way how we can meet with each other, how we can discuss and provide some updates, what is happening in terms of innovation in each of our countries. And we catch up is a certain way how we formally basically catch up with each other activities, share new updates, and discuss about different and potential collaborations. But as part of this meeting, we usually invite a guest speaker who is either part of our members, a partner, a potential partner who is going to join the board, or somebody who is external but brings lots of insights in these meetings in one of the topics which is related to innovation. So we usually discuss about SMEs and how we can bring innovation in SMEs. We have discussed about open innovation platforms, about how corporates can become more innovative and how they can navigate the uncertainty of the business world, how basically different topics like you are going to talk today, education, or like other industries like food industry or basically other services are disrupting, and basically how are they intersecting with innovation. So this is a way how we can learn more things, but is a way also how we can collaborate with each other and bring more people to our network. So we are very happy to have you here. TVG and Cristiano did an introduction of you, and we will cover a topic today which basically we haven't done in this month. We haven't talked a lot about like formal education. We have talked a lot about what GIMI is doing in the end, which is about different trainings that we are offering in terms of innovation, but not in education as a whole. So TVG will talk about why continuing education for the educated is urgent in this 21st century. And he is going to cover different hypotheses, which are very interesting, while current system of education developed for the needs of the industrial revolution is outdated. The needs of the 21st century are uncertain given the dynamic nature of change, which is something that we always talk about it. And the third thing is, it is more important to give citizens the ability to self-learn, unlearn, and relearn. And the fourth is institutional mechanisms to do this are impossible to generate. So let's discuss about this hypothesis, if there is a solution that TVG is proposing to this $1 million question, which is basically everybody, every institution, every country is discussing right now, and it's very important for the future of humanity. So I'll give the floor to TVG. TVG, you have always 20 to 30 minutes to talk about it, and then let's use the Q&A session from the members who are here today, so we can ask more questions and basically you can provide to us more insight. So I'm going to share the screen for you, and please feel free to tell me if I should stop more in one slide or another one.
Before you start, Irila, thank you very much to all of you for having me with you. It's always a privilege to, when Chris says, can you say something? And then it's always a pleasure. Not that I may be venturing into areas which are beyond my capability. Bear with me. So let me start. We said there is a need for continuing education of those who are already educated. The first, so question is, what's that you're educated about? And who is this that's educated, and what is that word educated? Is a passive term or an active term? And is it necessary to be active or passive? That's the question. And there is a hypothesis that Irila has already mentioned, that I would say to you that the current systems of education are really outdated, completely outdated for the kind of demands that are coming on us and likely to accelerate in the next 10, 20 years. Don't think about the century. Don't think about the 10, 20, 30 years. And the rate of change is going to be so phenomenal. And the need for education, therefore, it becomes all the more important. Next slide, please. And let me first talk about the Industrial Revolution. And whatever we are living through is in the last 300 years. What the Industrial Revolution did was to mechanize and standardize various parts of social activity, production of different kinds of goods and services. Please stop me if you think I'm either talking nonsense or something I'm saying is not clear enough. So the entire education system post the Industrial Revolution, or in the throes of the Industrial Revolution, was geared to supply human beings as, if I may use the word, cattle of different varieties. Some dogs, some cats, some oxen, some other horses, and so on. Basically, the society said we require nurses so many, engineers so many, teachers so many, XYZ. And these categories were standardized. Teacher would mean teaching, primary education will mean this. And that's the standardization that the industrial societies brought in, and they propagate that across the world if you wanted to industrialize. Categorize them under different categories, nurses, etc., standardize them. The next question was, the numbers required was large. So you had to produce them in bulk. And if you had to produce standardized, masons, carpenters, you had to have some way in which you can get them all together, train them with that particular system. Then the quality management. In other words, if you have a system of education, how can you ensure that the nurses being produced in one institution is same as the nurses produced in another institution and meet the requirements of the society? And since education was a primary responsibility of the society and therefore the government, the role of the government in defining both the quality parameters and all that, quality parameters and standards for passing people at the level at which they passed were all defined. Remember, the education's purpose of education was threefold post-industrial revolution. Number one, build a sense of community within the group that they are operating, nation, state, religion, whatever. The second was, what are the rules by which you live within that society, the civic rules? And given these two basics of being citizen of that particular state or country, how do you earn a living? And therefore, on what is the means of earning the living? So you standardize the categories, created demand and supply, and then created pricing mechanism. That has been the next slide, please. So, like I mentioned to you, implications of education is a societal responsibility. It's not as if, as in the olden days in many countries, you learned with some guru, either a music or otherwise, it has now become a societal responsibility because of the nature of the bulk. And then the industrial society said, if you are a mason, an incremental upgradation in your skill is sufficient. You learned it, got on with the job, got into a job, right? Got married, educated, learned. You concentrated on other things, not in education anymore. It was enough that you incrementally upgraded yourself. You didn't have to learn too much. There was some level of societal stability in roles and the skill sets required to fulfill those roles. Now, the next implication of that was an individual is a cog in the wheel. He was merely, I'm a nurse. How do you introduce yourself? My name is so-and-so, I'm a nurse. It's in such and such a hospital. The branding that individuals got was as a cog in the wheel. So if you're a mason, you could be a mason, head mason, supervisory mason, and then whatever, at the hierarchical level. But broadly speaking, you operate in your own space. That's why I'm saying at the end, once educated, done for life. Whatever you have spent money on education, you cashed in on those. This was the education. So you promise an individual that you come and get educated, you can earn a livelihood for life. And all you need to do is incrementally upgrade your skills. This was the model. Now, this was not the model. This is the model on which all universities, schools, all education systems currently are patterned after. In Europe, it's already 800 years old. They started off as a religious institution, and in Islamic countries, madrasas have been there for ages, right? And these are the extensions that have occurred since then. Next slide, please. I am going to run through this because I have no clue. This is just to give certain context so that we can discuss rather than make a presentation of profound thought. All I'm saying to you as a person who is on the ground level watching the changes, this is my takeaway. What's different in the 21st century? First, the magnitude and frequency of change. You know this already. In every single field, no pharma company can assume that they can exist the way they have existed for the last 20 years, 40 years, 50 years, come in the coming next 20 years. The way of discovery of drugs has changed. The way of production of drugs has changed. The way of distribution of the drugs has changed. The way of consumption of the drugs has changed. The way the drugs are administered to individuals have changed, just as an example. And the rate of that change, the frequency of that change, and the magnitude of that change, both of them are accelerating. The second point is that in the 21st century, the extent and the spread of the change. In other words, in the past, you could make an innovation in Germany, and it took its time, maybe 50 years to spread all over Europe, then another 20 years, and then went on to the rest of the world. This is not so. Somebody who never used, the consumer who never touched a phone, is using today not merely a mobile phone, but using a smartphone, consuming content that the individual would never have dreamt of. And the speed of its spread. So I'm saying it is reaching nooks and corners quickly, and the extent to which it's changing. This is also high. Unforeseen and unexpected changes. If I may tell you, you do not know who is going to hit you from the left, from the back, or from the front, or from the side. The one thing I tell all the entrepreneurs is, in the past, when you do a race, you only have to watch out for the guy in front and the person at the back. In the world of today, forget about today means 20th century. In the world of today of the 21st century, people don't come from the front and the back. They come from the side. They come in cars when you're running. In other words, you're racing against a car, you're not racing a standard 400 meters race. This is a Pellman. You're racing all kinds of things. That's what I mean by unforced. And the events, the number of black swan events that we are experiencing will increase disproportionately, both unexpected, unforeseen in the area in which you operate. And I'm talking about this. The other aspect of it is, whatever changes are occurring are both disruptive. In other words, they are not incremental. I do the pharma drug. I use the pharma. I hope some of you, otherwise I can use any particular industry example. And it was within the contiguous space that any incremental innovation was occurring. Disruption occurred, but not in. Who would have imagined, Elon Musk in space business, or somebody else in the space business? It wouldn't have been thought of. And so, both in terms of the scale of disruption and the number of dimensions in which they are occurring. There is a slide that Chris was reminding me of yesterday. It occurs both, the changes occur, the disruptions occur both from the market side and from the technology side. And these are occurring, business model disruptions or various other kinds, that from a technology, business model combinations and all kinds of disruptions. And these are only going to be much more than earlier. The other part of it is, some of these disruptions, and they are fast-pacing disruptions, are also economic, technical, and political. The origination of these changes, in addition to on-the-ground disruptions we have talked about earlier, right? For example, in the last 30 years that you had the Thatcher-Reagan Washington consensus rule, the model that every one of us has adopted. But that in itself may be changing. The extent of inequalities in the society, whether they would, they are unlikely to decrease, or maybe they decrease, but the rate at which they are increasing. And the political world. All of these also have their own implications. And 21st century is going to be, the speed of change is going to be much faster. Next slide, please. So what does that mean? Disaggregation of production and service. Right. If anything that industrial revolution, post-industrial revolution societies have seen is aggregation. There was a village doctor providing for the medical requirements of the village. Now you have an aggregated hospital located somewhere else where the doctors, nurses, and the patients get together for a solution of for a healthcare solution, right? This is the service aggregation that has occurred before. In manufacturing, a similar way the production was aggregated. The tailors, the artisans all went away. Production occurred in automobiles, various other things. But this trend is going to reverse. Disaggregation of production and service for reasons of cost, for reasons of technology, is going to happen globally. New different models, new different areas. And this is going to be driven by the cost of technology that is constantly coming down. It was only Moore's law in chips. It's now Moore's law everywhere, right? The other element is ideas took time because of restrictions of boundary restrictions of the nation states. But this is now, there is a global movement of both jobs and facilities. Because production is getting disaggregated and the costs are, so the facilities move. Today, the manufacturing center is China. Tomorrow is going to be Vietnam or Indonesia, or even maybe not, maybe Madagascar, for all I know. And the jobs are getting more and more to be virtual. So you didn't have to be, you know, that's already. The other element that's happening in a more rapid fashion is the way in which products and services are combining in novel ways to deliver new solutions to the customers. And this, the rate is in fact going to speed up. In the past, if I may say, there was standardization of product so that you could give quality, and then you made the product for masses, manufactured in bulk, delivered it to people saying, this is a generic model. But right now, it's not only the products that are changing, services are changing, and the combination of the two is taking its own shape. Compared to this, there is a different, a contra trend too. Global aggregators of information and gatekeepers. Amazon is the guy, is the organization that will tell you what to buy and when to buy, and which products to choose from. Similarly, Google will tell you what is fake news, what's not fake news. And if it's not Google, it'll Trump, whoever that is. I'm sorry, right? This is another trend of the 21st century. 21st century, I mean, it's only near term. Nobody can predict what will happen 60 years from now. The last bit is the vanishing social security net. The need for continuing education is also because there is no, the degree of social security net is disappearing. If you had a regular job with a regular company for a defined period of time, there was social security net that you could design and implement. But if you didn't have that, and this social security net is now being pushed to the individual with the growing inequality, and the individual who is otherwise educated is vulnerable. Part of the problems that you see in the global market, especially in the United States, is a consequence of this. that what they thought was a industrial revolution model has disappearing, and they feel insecure in their minds. Next slide. What does it mean to the educated? For example, I have certain skill sets. My job may disappear in the first instance. Whether you are a mason, will the job of a mason exist? But the job of a carpenter will exist. Will he be a self-employed, an apprentice person? All of this is up for grabs. And the total availability of the so-called job, for example, I'm a programmer, right? Will this, the numbers, will they reduce? And they may reduce drastically. Current skills will become rapidly redundant, and they change. I'm an excellent, whatever that is, maybe a musician, and there is substitutes that will come along. So whatever your skill set is, you need to be aware of what will hit you from the right side or the left side. And the kind of new skills expected of the individual are completely in the unknown territory. If I was a mason, I may know, or I can extend my skill set to carpentry. Even a little bit of architecture, a bit of what I can help a house owner to build a new house. But tomorrow, this may not be the case at all. And the new skills required of you will be in a completely unknown territory. And each skill that you may learn will be obsolete in a few years, right? I don't know how many. I see some of us are old, some of us are young. The old people can tell the younger ones. COBOL was a language that other people learned, right? And even so on. All of these are, every skill that you learn will become obsolete in the new. So this is the context in which currently educated people are going forward. Educated people will have to learn, will have to face. Next slide, please. I'm saying, okay, this is the change that we're talking about. This is the world that is changing. The comfortable given is gone. Some of us old people will fall away and disappear. But what will not happen? Quick policy and systemic changes in societies will not happen. Just like evolution cannot be speeded up, so is the societal formulation of what does it mean to be educated? What does it mean to earn a living out of education? What should be the policies? These will not change quickly. Educational infrastructure, governments, the one government has built has a built-in inertia, inertia. They will take much longer because this infrastructure is both physical and service-driven. A lot of investment that has gone into the teaching of people. Remember the old days, the fixed line world that we lived in, the copper that was laid out on the poles for miles and miles. All of that is gone waste, right? And changes have occurred. And the mindset of the workforce is also not going to change so quickly. Because parents have taught us what worked before will what worked for me will work for you. Maybe you have a better opportunity. But if you get educated in this manner, go to this school, go to Bandung, yes, you're okay. ITB Bandung, and but that will not. And this mindset, which need to change, will not change. The needed fluidity in capital and operational models. There's a lot of fluidity that is needed, because if you are changing constantly, if the skill sets change, become obsolete in every few years, the investments that you make, either in terms of building capability and capacity, right? How can you make this flexible enough? You will see you've already seen the glimpses of this. In the past, we used to work in factories and buildings. Now we don't. We go to WeWork and work, right? We work at whatever time that we like. There's already a change that you did not dream of 5 years ago. And more of this will occur. Next slide, please. And therefore, I make the case that since nobody's going to help you means help the individual, there is a need for creating a means for self-education. And this needs to be, right? And there is a need for persuading people, for need for continuing education, that he doesn't become obsolete, that mid-career, he does not lose his job forever. Nobody's looking, employing him again. And we need a mindset, and therefore, what can we do? Mindset training to learn, unlearn, and relearn. I'm a mason. I need to be a carpenter. If I may say, I'm a baseball player, and I want to be a golf player. The swing is different. The anticipation of the ball is different. The estimation of the distances are different. And that's the learning I have to do to play golf or baseball. Then I have to unlearn and relearn how to play golf, right? What the industrial factory model of education has done is that they have given us tools, different mathematics, differential equations where can you use, right? Basic ways in which engineering can be applied. These are the tools we picked up, but we haven't picked up the thinking behind the tools, the models of, because if the tools become irrelevant, our life is irrelevant. I use the word I as a matter of the community, right? So we need to be bringing in an educational system that makes people understand the model inherent in the tools. That's the next point. Therefore, you learn to discern pattern instead of data. Pattern inside the global pattern, the meta pattern, that is. And the last thing is you have to take one analogous situation and apply it elsewhere. How do you bring that skill so that you can quickly learn the new skill and be relevant? All of these are innovation areas where innovation is possible. All of this will not get done by the government. All of this will need to get done by the entrepreneurs and the people who fund those entrepreneurs. That's my case, and let's have a discussion. Did I take more time than given, Arila? I was not checking.
No, not at all, TVG. Thank you very much for the presentation. I would like to invite everybody, because I think all the hypotheses, it were like in the form of triggering us. What should we do for the next generation? How should we educate people? I see Ron that he is raising his hand. Ron, please.
So one great presentation. Thank you very much. I would, a little story, and I'd recommend his 3 books. So Peter Schwartz, who is co-founder of the Global Business Network and a renowned kind of futurist and strategic thinker and education and all that, he wrote 3 books, well, among others, but he wrote The Art of the Long View, Inevitable Surprises, and The Long Boom. He wrote those 20 years ago or 10 years, a long time ago. I worked with him. He was at the Monitor Group, and GBN was owned by the Monitor Group. And he was very proud of the fact, and it was a fact, that he projected or laid out the case for why terrorists would fly a jet plane into the World Trade Center. He did that close to a year before it actually happened. And he was proud of making that projection, proud of laying out that scenario, rightfully so. And I was in a group working with him at the time, and I didn't blame him, but I blamed the monitor group for never finding a way to translate that into action, because it was not an 80% probability. It was a 20%, 10% possibility. And nobody believed that it was serious enough to take account of and take action. And so shame on Monitor and me and others. I was born the same year that Peter Schwartz was, 1946. And we were the leading edge of the baby boom. We know that this is important. We know adaptive learning is important. We know preparedness is important. We know pattern recognition is important. We know thinking and acting differently behind the tools is important. And yet we have not been able to come up with a compelling enough case or solution that anybody except on the fringe, which we all are in a sense, has taken up wholeheartedly. And so I appeal to all of you to think big, because thinking little is not going to get us there. I mean, I agree 100%, whether it goes all the way back to the education system. I mean, we proposed 30 years ago, when Bush was president, maybe it wasn't 30 years, a long time ago. I was on a commission with President Bush to fundamentally alter public education in the US to make it more about adaptive learning, more about preparation, more about working in teams, more about entrepreneurship. And we had pilots that showed tremendous benefits of the kind of experiential education, whatever you want to call it, that we were proposing. And as I said, there were pilots everywhere. And at that point, the teachers' unions and the elected officials were so afraid of change, or so, it can't be done, too big a change, we're never going to be able to do it. And so nothing happened. And so we're stuck, as the speaker just said, in an antiquated educational system, an antiquated bureaucratic and policy system. And at 76 years old, as Peter Schwartz is, I've got a lot of energy around this, but I don't see, and I see solutions, but I don't see feasible solutions. I don't see solutions that are going to change our trajectory fast enough, whether it's about climate change or whatever. People just, they kick the can down the road. Everybody in a position of power kicks the can down the road. And there's another book out recently about, what the hell is it called? Ministry of the Future. It's almost a science fiction novel. It is science fiction, in fact, about the UN finally, like in 2 or 3 years, having established a ministry of the future to address today the needs of the unborn or the recently born. And it's a quite stimulating book, even though it's science fiction, about the things that would have to happen to have policies and programs and everything in place to address what's coming at us. And I agree, it's coming sideways, it's coming underneath us, it's coming from on top. It's not clear to enough people that it's in front of us or behind us. And so I look forward to anybody who is willing to kind of join us and the speaker and everybody else to come up with an action plan. Strategy fails in the first battle, and culture always trumps strategy. So we have to have some, we talk about portfolios, we talk about platforms. We have to have some way of moving forward with a compelling enough vision and action plan that a lot of the stakeholders join us. We can't just kibitz from the side. We've got to find a way to get this to the mainstream. And that's what GIMI is all about, trying to democratize innovation. But we've been doing this for 20 years. And we've just the tip of the iceberg. So I look forward to anybody who can either work together to find that compelling action plan or who's already got it in their hip pocket, because the problem's well known by the friend, by all of us probably on this call. The solution, while it's there, does not have enough support or whatever to make it happen. So that's my appeal as chairman of GIMI, is for all of us to focus on action and how we can move this forward now, not 10 years from now, not 20 years from now, but now for our children, for the unborn, and for us. You know, it used to be it was for the children and unborn, but now it's for us. You know, we're going to be impacted by this, not just our children and not just our grandchildren and not those that are just unborn. So we can't afford to kick the can down the road. We can't afford that as a community, as a nation, as a professional organization. We've got to grab that can now and deal with it, in my view. So I don't know what others feel, but I'm pretty passionate, as you can tell, about this, but pretty frustrated about what we've been trying to do for the last, I've been trying to do it. And as some of you know, my father put a man on the moon. He was head of all the propulsion systems for NASA. So if we can goddamn put a man on the moon, we sure as hell better be able to do this. But we have to come together on something. And since I can't put a man on the moon, that's not worth doing anymore. I'd like to do this moonshot. GIMI has always been about moonshots. So maybe we can come together on this and find an action plan that we can all rally around and make happen. Sorry for that long response, but I thought it was a great talk. And my only concern is we've heard it in different versions. For Peter Schwartz was year 2000. So at least 25 years. And I've heard it, of course, all my life. I don't know. It's time to act. We have to all have a bias for action somehow.
Thank you, Ron, for the appeal. I see Bob raising his hand. Bob, please, we would like to hear more about your perspective as an educator and professor yourself.
So Bob Schultz with the Haskell School of Business at the University of Calgary. My students participate regularly in Innovation Olympics, and I certainly encourage that to anyone that's tied to business schools. So having attended the GIMI annual conference with Innova in Cartagena, and we have one coming up in Flanders in mid-June, I think we might be able to find someone to use the lunches because we have the right people in the rooms. So my thought is, instead of just listening to them doing their talks, why don't we get their brainwork together and find some way of getting this, not just for one session, but maybe some sort of continuation or a board or something like that. And that way, we'll be able to at least get the people that see the same problems and may have some idea on the solutions. Coincidentally, on climate change, I had that in 1980. I'll take credit for that. Thank you very much. Based upon the ice cores in the Antarctic and the National Geographic, and nobody paid attention. I had telework with a book. It was 12 years ago about what would happen if you had disruptions and nobody paid attention, and all of a sudden it crept up on us. And we still haven't seen all the hacking of all the companies that put their too fast remote work done, and the hackers are just waiting for COVID to slow down before they crack even more. So there's a few ideas all in one place. TVG, I haven't been to Madras, but I've been to India. Welcome your ideas.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Bob. I'd like to provoke somehow the discussion, because it seems that, okay, the standard education is not meeting the needs of the job market, for sure. It seems that education has been a public good, and governments and universities has been the institutions who took responsibility in basically putting order and producing knowledge. Now it seems that everybody is producing and generating knowledge. Like the parents are generating knowledge, and in particular, we saw this during the COVID, right? That everything and the learning basically was done remotely, online, and parents took responsibility to teach their basically children. So corporates are teaching basically and producing knowledge for their workers as well. And because they saw that the university wasn't filling the gaps and basically teaching the students as the dynamics of the markets were changing. So it seems that everybody is acting as a teacher and is producing knowledge, and there are multiple institutions which are providing informal education as well, as GIMI is doing. But what is the answer? Do we dismiss the government, the teacher, the universities, and now everybody is generating and producing knowledge? But do we really believe in the quality of this knowledge? Because it seems that we are advocating for this, right? Self-learning, that the corporates should create their own academies, that students should be lifelong learning and learn more from the courses from informal education, and parents should provide their own framework. There are like Edwin is one of the, I would say like the person who has taught children even before COVID, and he used the GIMI framework to do that because he didn't believe in the standard education system. But my question is, do we believe that there is quality in that everybody has the right now to produce the knowledge? And so how should we rethink the role of the institutions, the traditional institutions like universities and the governments who did that?
So Aurelia, just one quick thing on that. I would appeal for us not to use the word knowledge, but to use other things like learning or adaptation or a number of things that were in the recent talk, because the challenge about knowledge, it's easy for lots of people to purvey their version of knowledge, and corporate, and they're worried that the current education system is teaching CRT or whatever damn thing they're worried about. But they're worried about things that are more about the past or barely the present. Corporate education even is about benefits to the corporation today to make more money. Very few corporates are teaching about how to be more adaptive and prepared for future that's coming upon us very fast. And so the Ministry of the Future, maybe that's why the Ministry of the Future was an interesting kind of book for me to read a few weeks ago. But I do think it has to come from my experience. It has to come from the outside. We cannot work from the inside with existing systems whose stakeholders, whose fundamental basis is preparing for today or barely for tomorrow. And that includes 90% of all colleges and universities, 90% of all professional associations and corporate groups, 95% of all parents who think they know better. I think we have to find a way to shake the system up from the outside. And Bob's appeal to, Innovation Olympics is just a tiny drop in the bucket of one thing that provides a very different approach to looking at the future with wide open eyes. But I don't know. But my appeal is let's move beyond knowledge. I think that was, to me, the essence of my takeaway from the talk this morning. It's not about knowledge. It's not about skill or traditional skill. It's about the ability to adapt, the ability to respond, the ability to pivot. It's all built into, as the speaker said, entrepreneurship, et cetera. But we've got to change this.
I like to second that. The acquisition of knowledge is relatively simple, but the ability to adapt, change, and change quickly, know what to look for and how to use it. And that's a skill set that isn't there. And that is the one that and it won't come from inside, I agree. It'll have to come from outside in. That's an opportunity.
And it has to happen fast. Charles Darwin taught us a lot about adaptation a couple hundred years ago. The Boy Scouts of America and the Girl Scouts of America teach everything was about preparedness, but it was about preparedness almost for yesterday. It wasn't preparedness for tomorrow because tomorrow was too far down the road. Now it's upon us. almost too late, whether it's global warming or whatever dimension you look at. And we have got to find a way to come to grips with that and know that none of us have the answer to what's going to happen. That's, to me, the takeaway again from the speech. But we have to prepare people for rapidly responding to curves in the road, to what's around over the next mountain.
I agree with you, Ron, but another question here is, should we rethink the role of universities and the traditional school system? Because as you are saying, of course, we are appealing for the outside, basically learning and whatever knowledge. But the thing is that the traditional school system and universities are trying to teach, I'd say, still a traditional mindset, right, to the students. And there is a confusing right now because the corporates and the other informal institutions are trying to say, be adaptive, be nimble, be flexible and whatever, and you can jump into another profession and this stuff. So how should we align these two, I would say, main paradigms?
That's the $64,000 question. You do it from without or you do it from within, and you take a revolutionary kind of transformational tactic, whether it's, I mean, that's what they did with digital transformation. So is there something here in preparing for the future that is going to transform how people prepare for that? I don't think it's transforming the education system. I think it's transforming how we are able to continuously learn and help other people learn and prepare for a very uncertain future.
So if I can interject, TVG, thank you so much for your presentation. Just make a little bit of background before I make my intervention. I was head of innovation for the country of Guatemala for a couple of years, and then I focused in the past 4 years. I've focused on a new company. I started focused on systemic innovation, and one of the things we've talked about a lot, or researched a lot, is education. And we worked a lot with nonprofits and Ministry of Education, et cetera, to try and tackle this issue. And Ron's call to action, I think, is super relevant. There's a couple things. I love how you say that policy and systemic change, or actually systematic change, is not going to happen. And I think we do need a systemic approach to solving this. There's a few things that I have found helpful in answering this question. So one is, if you look not at the education system as in the pipes and pipelines of talent going through formal education, but you look at the education system as in how the population is flowing through different ways of acquiring skills, and some of that pipeline goes through formal education systems, but a lot of it goes through informal education systems, mentors, apprentice. A lot of it goes through apprentice systems, particularly in countries like Guatemala. So there's three idea fragments that I find a lot of hope in as we try and respond to Ron's call to action. One of the idea fragments is that I think we need to move to an apprentice-based model versus the model that you described very accurately. The apprentice-based model has basically worked for thousands of years. And as we move into digital apprenticeships, where somebody who maybe knows just a little bit more JavaScript than me is teaching me and guiding me in JavaScript, and that gets me enough to be able to put my profile up on Upwork and be hired. I think the future that we need to build and foster is mass, and I call them micro apprenticeships and micro certifications. So how do you get a waiter to teach another person to become a waiter and get micro certified as a waiter and become employable at that skill set? But you're permanently getting micro accreditations or micro certified in a new skill set. But the teaching model is basically a peer-to-peer apprentice model. So that's one fragment I think has a lot of potential. And there's not a whole lot of startup activity in this, but I think we're heading in that direction, and some people are getting started. The second piece of the puzzle I think is really relevant. I do believe in self-education, but I think more than self-education, it's community education. Because at the end of the day, you can have a great gamified tool that teaches you math, but what's really going to have an impact on you developing the skill set is being a part of community that's giving you feedback and that you're competing with or learning with and building stuff together with. So I think it's not just a self-education strategy, it's a self-education within micro communities of learning. And those micro communities of learning there's a lot of that going on, especially in the digital space, fortunately. And the more we can integrate micro communities of learning with AI algorithms to give use to adaptable learning, I think the more powerful we'll be. But there's something very powerful about feedback from a peer, which is related to the apprentice model. But I think it's a really critical piece to that puzzle. And the third one is one of the analyses we did was the entire population of Guatemala flowing through the entire education system. And one of the things we did was figure out in a chapter of a book we were writing, how do you use digital transformation at each stage of the educational system appropriately? And this is one of the areas I think that's really critical, is what you do in preschool with digital transformation is very different than what you do in primary school, which is very different than what you do in early high school, which is very different than what you do late high school, which is very different than what you do at the university level. But the same principle applies of community-based learning that's digitally enabled. But the more you move into sort of, let's say, what kinds of projects can a primary school age person work on that they're leveraging peer-to-peer learning, leveraging YouTube, leveraging, et cetera, but they're building, let's say, a water tank for the town or for the community. And in the process of designing and building that water tank, they're learning math, they're learning construction, they're learning skills. Project-based learning, I think, really is the critical piece there, but I think it's different kinds of projects depending on the age you're in. So the third fragment that I'm really hopeful about is the more you can move into not just an apprentice model, which is leveraging micro communities, but those micro communities are actually trying to solve real problems that the micro community has, and they're using learning as a tool to adapt to solve the problems. I think that combination is very, very powerful for moving the direction that you're trying to move in. And to Ron's question, I'll finish with this. Who should lead this? I think it's really hard for ministries of education to lead this. There's the whole incentive system and the teacher incentive system is just not set up to do that. I think it's really going to be led by entrepreneurs. And at the end of the day, it's the entrepreneurs' customers. So who are the entrepreneurs' customers? The companies hiring talent are the ones who have to shift from, I'm going to hire you based on your curriculum or your CV or your high school diploma, and I'm going to hire you based on micro certifications you have. When you have that shift happening where companies are hiring people based on micro certifications, then the whole industry and entrepreneurs around building micro certifications becomes the key driver for the cultural transformation.
So Ben, excellent idea. My concern is that apprenticeship models, which I heartily endorse as a mechanism, as well as micro certification, still get rooted in the past. Because apprentice programs, you are learning from a peer, an experienced peer who has experienced the past, but has no clue and less interest in the future than you probably do. So I worry about apprenticeship program, or resting too much on apprenticeship programs, because they end up teaching people to be waiters, not about what the future of the food industry is going to be. And so it may be a good entry vehicle to enable people to get a start in whatever industry it is, and hopefully find a mentor or a coach who can be their future eyes and ears. But I worry about the apprenticeship program. And for the same thing, I worry about micro certification. I even worry about GIMI certification. For 10 years, and this is just a personal thing, you know, I've been pushing for rapid simulation, virtualization, visualization, gamification as something we should be training people in to be more prepared for the future, so that you can test alternative scenarios, 1,000 scenarios at a time, not one at a time every few months. And there's no certification for that. It's hard even to get GIMI, as futurist as we are, to put that into certification, because people are saying, ooh, that's not for me. I need to learn the basics of what worked 5 years ago or what's working last year, not about what might work 3 years from now, because it's probably 10 years from now. You're smoking. And so I worry, I think micro certification would be great if we had this ministry of the future that's in the book by that name, because we're not designing it. We're trying to design it for the future. I've tried to get even Arila and others, it's like pulling teeth a little bit to say, we need to be certifying for what's needed in the future, not certifying for what it takes to be a CPA today. And so I applaud your thoughts and just wonder how we can make them future oriented enough so that we are absolutely preparing people for the unknown and uncertain future that's going to be upon us in a few years, not a few decades. And shame on us if we can't find a way to do that. My feeling about it is that, as I learned long ago, much to my dismay, is people don't do things based on hope. They do things based on fear. And so again, that's why I like Ministry of the Future just as a silly book, because it makes people afraid. If we don't do something, I don't know if you guys kind of read it, it starts off with hundreds of thousands of people dying in a heat wave in India. And finally, that makes people wake up. There's even an incident in it long before it happened, of the clogging of the Suez Canal, which then happened about 6 months after the book was written. So, you know, it may take those things, but I think we need to find a way, as much as none of us like to motivate by fear. I certainly don't. But I'm learning the hard way that it works and nothing else works. And it has to be fear of what's going to happen tomorrow or tonight to your children, whether you're living in the Ukraine or whether you're living here in the US or in India. And, you know, it's the fear of, my God, there is a possibility of a deranged ruler launching a nuclear attack and launching cyber attacks around the world because he's in a corner and will do anything he can. I don't think anybody really thought that was possible, because people like Saddam Hussein didn't have that power to be able to unleash their wrath on the world. And so somehow, I hope it doesn't take a lot more mass killings, a lot more whatever, to motivate us, but we have to find a way of using fear as well as hope to get people to get serious about preparing ourselves and our kids for the future. And that's just as I'm listening to you and I'm thinking about what I've done and failed at, as well as what I've done and succeeded at, in this arena, I spent way too much of my time based on a hope for the future and what I believe that people who were well intended could do, without getting to the fundamental truth that we just heard about earlier today. So I don't know what your thoughts are, Ben, but I think that's what I worry about with apprenticeships and
yeah.
education.
I mean, I think it's a great question. And certainly nobody loves, it's easier for people to change because of fear than of hope. But I always bring this back down to Guatemala. So what really needs to happen in order for our 15-year-old to learn how to do programming of drones? What really needs to happen is the exporter of our agriculture products needs to be afraid that if they don't implement IoT and traceability into their agriculture products, they won't be able to export anymore. Right. So they take leadership to say, we're going to implement IoT and drone monitoring into our agriculture system. And they convince the financiers, the banking system, to finance implementing these technologies, and they convince the educational system to create micro certifications around drone training and repair training and programming. And so it's a it's a systemic business that requires launching probably 15 or 16 businesses at the same time in order to solve that one problem of digitizing our agricultural exports. And what I have found lacking is the people with that leadership to say, let's put this together and let's put these 15 businesses together, because they're all interdependent at some level. And you require finance to be on board, and business leadership and strategy and operations to all be on board to see that this is where we need to head.
So one quick comment. So you mentioned tracking traceability. I've been using in this course for emerging leaders in Brazil this example of a small startup fishing company. That's now the largest seafood company in New England, called Red's Best. He was a fisherman, had no formal education. He knew lots of other fishermen who felt they were being abused by an antiquated kind of supply chain and everything else. So he wanted to make the fishermen trust him and trust a new way. So he did have a little software capability and friends who knew it well. And so he put together a whole system for tracking and traceability so that he could guarantee fresh fish. And what did he do? He also put on the label of every seafood package who caught it with a picture of the fisherman. So he celebrated the fisherman who had no formal education either, and where it was caught, when it was caught, how it was caught, who caught it, what ship was it. And what was interesting is the customer base and the financiers were excited about it a little bit, but they quickly weren't excited about it anymore because they trusted him, that he was going to do it, and they didn't need to read the damn label to believe that it was wild caught, locally caught, fresh. And so, but he had to combine lots of capabilities, not just the software, to make that work. But he made it work. And what happened interestingly yesterday, he was about to depart from that. He had made so much money building his business and building essentially a new version of a fisherman's co-op. He was going to go buy a fleet of vessels because the vessels, fishing vessels, were becoming available at auction yesterday afternoon. So he spent 9 sleepless nights writing a proposal to buy this fleet of fishing. I'm his coach, so I know a lot about this. To buy this fleet of fishing vessels. And yesterday morning at 7 a.m., he pulled the plug and said no. Why? Because even though he had the money and there were those assets, they were the assets of the past. They weren't the assets of the future. And the future rested on the trust he had built and the vision he had built to have the fishermen trust him and his fledgling, well, no longer fledgling, 10 years ago, company to lead them into the future. And so by buying a fleet of vessels, he was entering the past, re-entering the past and threatening the future, because the fishermen were saying, wait a minute, you're going to compete with me with old-fashioned vessels? What are you going to do? Are you going to leapfrog me and make me antiquated and make my skills and my loyalty and my capability out of, no longer available? So I think we've had this debate about GIMI and IXL. What we do needs to be software and digitally enabled, but software and digital is not the solution. It's just an enabler to build preparedness, flexibility, adaptiveness, whatever else we're talking about. And I think we need to find a way to use it to do that, as opposed to use it for artificial intelligence that's going to give us access supposedly faster to knowledge that we can game and beat somebody to the finish line, which is tomorrow, but not the next day. So I don't know I know I'm sounding a little bit like a smelly fungus, but I think I'm trying to make it a call to action. We need to find a way. There are not that many organizations who have our network, whether it's this GIMI think tank, or as Bob talked about, Innova Flanders, Innova Latam. And we need to use that to find a solution, whether it's, we used to try to do it through the Hult Prize. They've kind of lost their way. So we need to do it in another way that brings this to the fore and brings this to people who can make things happen. I'll try to shut up now. I'm sorry, I'm quite passionate about this.
Thank you. Thank you, Ben and Ron, for sharing all these insights based on your experience. I saw Edwin raising his hand for a long time. Please, Edwin.
Yeah, thank you. I was I was about to say that I agree with Ron about the certifications and the grade and the scores, for example. One of the things that moved me to take my kids out of school 10 years ago was exactly that. I did, and I'm doing homeschooling with them. And my older kid, he finished high school last year, and he get one of the highest score in the state test, for example. So as Erila was mentioning, if the quality of homeschooling is good, I think that is the best one, because you get to choose wherever you're going to teach them. And and he was in the 2% or highest score in the country, for example. But what moved me to take my kid out of school? The thing is that 10 years ago, he started showing a lot of interest and passion for music, for example. So I asked in the school board, the rector of the school, that I need more time for him to practice music because he is a musician. And the rector of the school said, no, we cannot do that because he's not very good. Look, listen to this one. He's not very good at geography. So he needs to put more energy on geography because he needs to accomplish the standards of the country in geography. So the suggestion of the rector that time was we need to put more hours on geography and less hours in music because he's very good in music. And that's how Colombia is working. We have the grades. And if you are very good in math and very bad in geography, they are going to push you to be good in geography and are going to take hours out of math because you already know math, right? So, and this is the whole country. So what's happened when these kids are in high school is they're getting frustrated because the learning is not a good experience that you will feel passion like Ron, for example. I cannot say Ron, you're very good in education. Don't talk more in education, but you're very bad in social arts. Go to social arts. And that's what happened in Colombia in high school. So when the kid is like 14, 15 years old, and he's trying and fighting 10 years trying to be good in something that he's not good, he doesn't want to study anymore. So he's jumped out of the school and he start working. Why? Because the system in Colombia is pushing people to be good in something that they don't like. And they start associating school with frustration, school with grades. I am not good at math, but we don't know what they are good at. And Elon Musk said it. Elon Musk he's already built his own school for his kids because he said there's no point to push the people to learn history, and every year the history is a big because we are running with the time. So they need to be good at history, good at geography, good at blah 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 blah. So they are getting tired of the same thing. And when they are 18 years old, 17 years old, they don't want to do nothing because they are tired. And in Colombia, they are spending, the kids are in school at 7 a.m. and they are getting home at 5 a.m. at 5 p.m. Almost 10 hours a day in some system that is not working. So it's not that the people, they don't want to learn. They already get tired because they are not learning. So I just want to share that with that. And I agree with you. We cannot get the certification as the proof that your knowledge, because we are not certifying the knowledge. We need to be sure that they are learning how to move forward in a world that is changing, as we are saying in GIMI, and very fast.
So Edwin, I wonder if if you combine the need to personalize and customize what a person is naturally good at or naturally excited about, that was a piece of what we did, unfortunately, 30 years ago or whatever, the Bush administration, but we combined it primarily with collaboration. So they learned the skill that came naturally to them. You can almost learn it alone or learn it at home or learn it online. But then the education, which was why it failed, was collaboration. It was putting people together in teams who brought different skills to the team. So it was diverse teams. And the teams were intended to apply what they knew best, but in combination with what other people knew best, so that they could achieve a result. And I still actually believe in that. That's essentially the part of the fundamentals of the Innovation Olympics. But we don't teach that, and I don't know how to teach that. But I think in Brazil, as you know, the whole program is based on collaborative leadership, not individual hero entrepreneurship. It's entrepreneurship applied in a collaborative model. So collaborating to win, collaborating to figure out what's new and what's next. But so I do think it, at least from my experience, that it's important to allow and encourage children to find their sweet spot. Having 6 children, I know how important that is. But it's also important that they recognize the value of other sweet spots that other people have, and that they find a way in a simple GIMI language to connect the dots, and to find a way to connect the dots in a way that they can collaborate to make a difference. So I think you're right. I think that personalization, that experiential piece, that natural inclination is important, but it needs to be combined with some kind of Renaissance education appreciation for working together and collaborating.
Thank you, Edwin, Ron, for bringing another perspective.
HP, you're mute. Thank you.
Well, if I may make a comment first, thank you for your presentation. I thought it was interesting, and it provoked some ideas. But I personally think the best learning is going to come from the people who are in the field and are driving the cutting edge thinking. Our problem in our education system is you need a PhD, you need a degree to teach sometimes. And I would rather learn about social media when Mark Zuckerberg was at Harvard as a student. I don't want to learn from his professor. His professor knew nothing. I would rather learn from somebody who's out there, who's pushing the envelope and allowing them to become teachers, but our institutions don't allow them to teach because we think that they are not academics. They don't have the right to teach. And I think that's one paradigm we need to break as soon as possible, that our academic institutions and our people who have got into the greenhouse or the glass house are the ones who stop these people from even teaching. In this group, at Arthur D. Little, for example, and all the people I know, they were better professors or knowledge, they had more knowledge than most of the PhD professors I had gone to college with. And I would rather learn from my peers, and we need to change that paradigm and give respect to those individuals so that they have the right to teach. And the right to teach is not just for Bob Schultz. Thank you, Dr. Bob, and Carlos and other people, but for those who are actually on the edge, cutting edge, and sharing. So I'll stop there, but I just want to share that point with you guys.
Completely agree. And now we have the technologies to scale that up. We don't have to deal with the barriers. I don't happen to have a PhD. I have 3 master's degrees, but that doesn't add up to a PhD. So a lot of schools say, where's your PhD? But you don't have to, there's other ways to share your experience and share your insight. And with Zoom, just as a simple thing, but we're enabling or forcing people to be able to learn in a very different kind of way than they ever learned before. You don't have to sit in a class, you don't have to write a paper, you don't have to And so if we have particular educators like Attender who are also entertainers, so it's edutainment, and we can engage them and have them excited to listen to people and learn from them, I think that's right. It unfortunately opens you up to disinformation and kind of crazy people too, but we've got to find a way to enable people who have a lot to share it with lots of other people. So that scaling is to me the issue.
Thank you, Ron. HP, TVG, any last comment before bringing this meeting to the end? You are on mute.
I think you have tons of knowledge and competencies within there. It's just a question of harnessing. One small comment I would like to make. Right, this is bringing global changes is always difficult. Can we start some? I mean, call to action should start. If you do not have authority and power, or have access to authority and power, must start at the bottom. Now, I like the idea of the, I don't mean personally, I like the idea of the communities, learning from each other, not in the way in which, learn the past, but go forward. So my recommendation would be, you as a group, while there is a global problem, but that's an individual problem. There's a person who is going to be faced with how to solve his problem coming in the 10 years, right? And if you do not, and that's an opportunity for entrepreneurship. That's an opportunity for innovation, right? Social changes at large scale cannot be done. Unless some of these group members are people who have enough influence to change the systems per se, that'll be long term. Climate change, which is on us, people don't even believe, some of them. So my recommendation, my urge, my plea to you, all of you, would be, what can we do as individuals and as a group to make a change? At the limited extent, leveraging the idea of community reinforcements, how can we take that to a much larger scale? And we have models. We have models that have worked in the last 10, 15 years in businesses. So my recommendation is that, and I would, great opportunity to be here with all of you, lots of good ideas, but my strong urge to you is ground them. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, TVG, for your wise words.